As students of Grace Follows Rhetoric of Coming Out class, we would like to thank you in advance for being here to talk to us today. And we're trying to understand the climate of Juniata in terms of the LGBTQIA community throughout history, and we're trying to record stories here today. And we'd like to just ask you and invite you to share some of your stories here, your time on campus, if that's okay.
Okay.
When did you first arrive on campus, and how would you describe the climate of the LGBTQIA community?
I was invited to come and create a communication program here at Juniata in 1990. I had tremendous flexibility, and I was the only person in communication. At that point, I was still part of the English department. And I say that only to give you some sense of how different it was in 1990. Okay. So we probably had about 86 faculty members. We had a much smaller student body. So today we have 1,600. Those are very recent high numbers. We were around 1,000 and we were under 1,000. So think much smaller. And the professors that were here when I came, and this is actually important if you want to understand climate, we were in the midst of a turnover in the early 90s. So half of the faculty by 1995, think about that, 50% of the faculty were retired. So the people that were here when I came in 1990, by 1995, half of them had retired. And at retirement dinners, it was not unusual for someone to give a speech about them and talk about how they had been here 46 years, 48 years, 50 years, and back then, some of them had worked at Juniata longer than I had been alive. Very curious to have that experience. So when you ask about the climate in relationship to LGBTQIA, you are talking about a serious generational difference. A different way of thinking about that, right? These are the same generations that lived through, for example, Alan Turing's experience in the 50s, where you still had, 49,000 people in jail in Great Britain for just being homosexual. So it was illegal. It was morally unacceptable, right? And we were much closer to our brethren roots in 1990. Now, the school itself in 1966 divided itself from its church rule, if you will, and we became associated or affiliated with the brethren. We did that quite deliberately. But we are still identified as one of the brethren colleges, like Elizabethtown or Bethany or other schools like that. All of this is a long way of answering your question. I think you had an essentially white, small college in central Pennsylvania with strong Christian roots that didn't, by its very nature of being brethren, didn't evangelize against being gay. But you would also know it wasn't something you would do.
Did you notice any difference from your previous encounters or experience with other colleges or universities? I know that you worked at a different university at one point.
Well, I think sometimes working at a very large university, there's just tremendous diversity. Right? So if you come to a homogenous place where, the students are all white, you had a very, how do I want to say this? People left Juniata with their mates for life. And when I say that, I mean men and women. It was not unusual, right, to have alumni come back who had met at Juniata and had been married for 20, 30, 40 years. That's a tradition. That's a way of looking at relationships that is very, very heterosexual, and it's dominant, and it's preferred, if you will. And so I think anyone who was LGBTQIA would have felt that. And that's what I mean when I say, there were closets within closets. To bring, which I did in 1992, I hired Grace Falla. And she's a lesbian. She was admittedly a lesbian. She didn't go around pronouncing that, but I was also very aware of what I was doing. And I think she was very aware that she was coming to not a heterogeneous, but a very a community that, I'm not going to say closed. It wasn't closed, but we had a long way to go.
Speaking of a long way to go, have you noticed any change in Junietta's climate over the years that you've been here?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I think it was. I could almost see us going through cycles. And I would say that Juniata was ready for change. Think about it. So by 1995, you have 50% of the faculty are now brand new. And they're younger, lots younger. They're coming in with a different set of attitudes, a much more accepting, a much more tolerant attitude. We had Michael Henderson, who was also openly gay. So, those are like cracks in a set of deep-seated. It takes pioneers like that to just be who they are and to assume acceptance, which is not to say that Grace coming here and making a political statement by starting alternative ways of loving, which is what it was initially called, was not difficult. I was there. I was there to hear her voicemail and hear the hate and hear people leave calls for her and threaten her and accuse her of things. Starting that club, though, had this ripple effect that no one would believe. Within the first 3 years, she had heard from over 200 alums that thanked her for opening the doors and letting them finally acknowledge who they actually were, and proud to be a Juniatian, right?
You mentioned cycles, and you have a really great perspective on seeing what it's like to have students come in as freshmen and leave as seniors, and then new freshmen come in and leave again as seniors. What have you seen over the years, or can you think of any specific examples?
A couple of things. Teaching about feminism or racism or about gender in the early 90s was talking about ideas most of the students had never heard about. I would not say that that's true today. I think there was a real turning point in the late 90s where students were coming in and there was greater tolerance. I'm not saying that we have a completely tolerant population. I think it would be naive to assume that that would be the case. Juniata is a microcosm of the macrocosm. We have all kinds of people here. We have people who are blindly prejudiced. We have people who are blindly intolerant. We have people who are confused. So, we run, I think, the gamut that our culture runs. When I look at students, though, today, I'm so proud and so amazed at the complexity of your thinking, the complexity of your willingness to, encourage new ideas, to think about new ways of the way the world is working. Maybe not be sure about who you are or what you want, but at least there seems to be a greater willingness to be aware that people have different needs and desires and trying to figure that out before you judge or condemn. I see that as a huge change. I think there was always the potential. Otherwise, we would not be where we are today. That potential was always there. But you were coming from homes where things like this, homosexuality, wasn't talked about. It was never mentioned in my home. Never. Going to college was the first time I had heard about it. So, you know, I think generationally, the influence of a generation is so much more profound than we really acknowledge, more than family, more than religion. You know, there's tremendous potential in that, which is why coming to a residential college is so important.
And so, speaking of that potential, then, what is your vision then for Juniata College's future?
I look forward to the day when it just doesn't matter. You know, who cares? Who cares? You know, when that is no longer the issue, it's no longer of importance. It just doesn't matter. Skin color doesn't matter. We are who we are. I think we have tremendous potential here at Juniata to be leaders. I don't know that we're doing it. I don't know that we're taking those steps. We're not big activists here. You know, we don't have marches. We don't have things happen in the world. I wish we did a little bit more of that. I wish we were more connected politically to how everyone lives their life makes a difference for every other life that is on this planet. And I don't know that we always do that.